welcome to today's session. We're having Coco. She's a planning lawyer with over 13 years of experience both in Argentina and England, and we are very honored to have her talk about her experience in her field. Thank you.
Thank you. I prepared some slides that I would like to share with you. It's a bit of an introduction on, how you become a planning lawyer in the United Kingdom and what exactly is that a planning lawyer does. I'm going to try and share. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. How about this? Is this working?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Cool. So there are different avenues that you can follow to become a lawyer in the United Kingdom. This is actually for England and Wales, not even the whole of the UK. So the first option is the most traditional one. Potentially, you just go to a law school, have a law degree, and then you do the LPC training, which is more of a practical approach to the topics you will review on at university. And then once you finish your LPC, which is an additional year or 2 years, depending if you go part-time or full-time, you will need to secure a training contract with a law firm, or I just put law firm, but it will be any entity. It could be a council, central government, different organizations offer training contracts, which usually last 2 years, and it's more of a full-on practical approach to the profession. You just rotate through different areas to get more of an understanding of how the field operates. And then after that, you're a fully qualified solicitor. This is changing this year. So I think from this year onwards, after you finish your LPC, you will have to take what it's called the super exam, which is a full comprehensive exam. And based on that, you are either qualified or you're not, but the training contract will not be required. If you don't have a law degree, which this is probably more applicable to you that are currently studying planning, you can do the conversion course, which is this graduate diploma in law, which can take up to 2 years. And then again, the training contract, which will now be superseded by the super exam. If you don't have any degree at all, there's the option that's called CILEX, Chartered Institute of Legal Executives. This is usually used by people who are currently working in the law profession, but not as lawyers, for example, as a paralegal or perhaps a legal secretary. And these people, the ones that follow this avenue, have plenty of experience, but not an actual diploma. And the CILEX is a certification whereby you can, you can provide evidence of everything you have done, all your cases you worked in, and a bit of the basic knowledge of accountancy and the solicitor's ethics and so on, and you can qualify as a solicitor as well. The final avenue, and this is the one that I used, is when you're qualified in a different jurisdiction. I was qualified in Argentina when I moved to the UK, and you can take an exam that's called QLTS, Qualified Lawyers Transfer Scheme, and you become a solicitor if you manage to succeed in these exams. The exams is 2 sets of exams. The first one is pretty much like a law degree, and you study the same topics you would study at undergrad stage. And the second stage, it's equivalent to the LPC, and it's more of a practical understanding and knowledge of the profession. What does a planning solicitor do? So if you manage to qualify and you're employed as a planning solicitor, there are different roles, different ambits in which you would end up working. So the 2 big groups will be non-contentious work and contentious work. Contentious work we'll see it in the next slide, but it's more everything that happens at a court. So it's directly adversarial, whereas non-contentious still has some element of confrontation, but it's not in a court of law. So the agreements are the bread and butter of the planning profession. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the life of a planning permission, but basically once you apply for planning permission, if the development for which you're going for does not comply with local plan, the local authority can still grant you permission subject to conditions which are attached to a planning permission, or planning obligations, which is a commitment you make with the local authority to provide things that will, in a way, rectify the elements that are missing from your development to make it compliant with the local plan. The most common planning agreements are agreements under the Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act, but you can also have infrastructure agreements such as highways agreements, pipes, waste disposal, you name it. It's basically, just stop me at any time if you have any questions, but if you have a development where you're providing X amount of residential units, the council is likely to require some affordable housing element, or for you to rebuild the roads or provide landscape. They're very creative. The bigger the scheme is, the more complex and involved the agreement will be. So they kind of go together. We also provide general advice to different clients, anyone who has a planning issue. It could be a house builder, could be retail, could be an individual, anyone. The legal advice, general advice, is usually for them to have an understanding of where they're standing and what the legal position is. So it could be on matters of SIL. SIL is a community infrastructure levy, is a tax that is payable on new development or permitted development rights. Those, you probably know, is just an order that basically says, for all these things, you don't need planning permission, but it's very complicated and it's sometimes hard to follow and it changes all the time. So the client wants to know if what they have on site falls under permitted development rights, or if they need planning permission. Environmental matters, anything from waste, land contamination, highways. Highways is a completely separate regime. It's at a separate act, and it's very archaic and complicated most of the times. Obviously, planning, listed buildings, tree preservation orders, town and village greens, and assets of community value. If any of these concepts are not known to you, please let me know and I can stop and explain. We also provide advice on enforcement matters before and after the enforcement takes place, compulsory purchase orders, and also we provide support in a law firm. This is more an angle that has to do with practicing law in private practice. We provide support to other areas such as property or litigation when they're trying to buy or sell land. We just make sure that everything from the planning point of view is tight and there's nothing that needs to be amended. More contentious work. This is when a planning permission is refused or hasn't been determined. So the client will have the option to either go for a planning appeal at the planning inspectorate, or you can challenge a decision, any decision made by the local authority or central government by way of judicial review, or specific planning challenges. These are also take place in a specialized planning tribunal, and I put High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, because those are the different levels that you have to escalate to get to the final decision. You can stop at any point anyway, and there's other challenges to local plans or neighborhood plans, TPOs, enforcement action, you name it. So that's in a nutshell what we do. I mean, it's I'm gonna stop stop sharing now so I can go back to see you. That's an absolute summary of what we do. And, I worked for both the public sector, local government and central government, and I work for private practice as well. And, there's always a different angle depending on where you're sitting and who you're acting for. But the principles of planning law are pretty much the same. One thing I would say is being a planning lawyer is a very active area of law because it's constantly changing and being amended. Planning is usually quite central to the government, so they are trying constantly to fix wider problems by way of using planning tools, for example, lack of housing or protecting the environment, the green belts, nature, and planning always comes to play. It's always the easy way to try to control things and where we go. And as lawyers, we're there to control what's happening. When I was acting for a local government, my role was slightly different because I was also advising planning committee. So, you have to also be fully aware of the council's constitution and just make sure that everything that happens during a planning committee is legal and can be enforced later on. But it's, any skills that you have as a planning solicitor are very much transferable depending on where you're sitting. You're always speaking the same language if you want. I don't know if this makes any sense. I don't really know your background and whether the terms that I'm using are a bit abstract, but I'm happy to go a bit deeper if you guys have time and energy to hear me talk about this. Have you guys have any questions, any comments to start? We can start the conversation pretty much. I would like to just to have it like a chat if you want. Anyone?
Thank you for your sharing. It's really interesting to see how, not in detail, but how it actually works inside the lawyer's bedside. And I was just wondering if there's any memorable case that you could share to us within the planning side. Yeah.
There are many memorable cases. I'm just trying to think a funny one, but I don't know if I can. If you're recording, I think it might not be appropriate.
I'll stop it now.
I have had a few clients with highways issues, and I had to they had people living on a private field, and I had to walk around and identify whether excrement was human or non-human, just to determine whether there were people living on a highway illegally. That was quite ridiculous and gross. And then in London, most cases, I worked for central authorities like Kensington and Chelsea, and they were all in Westminster and Hackney. Some had to do with the Olympic Village and all the permissions surrounding the Olympic Village, and other cases are very technical but were really important in terms of legal background. I can't think of any flashy case in the Southwest. Nothing is very flashy in planning, I must say, but most cases, the main controversy is usually affordable housing and the amount of contributions. So that's where all the battlefield happens. I don't know if that really answered your question.
Thank you. And how long do they usually last? Say, I don't know how to ask it. How do cases take? How long do they take?
If we're talking of non-contentious work and drafting agreements, and you're trying to agree a certain wording with a local authority, that can take years. It can take 2 weeks, and it can take 10 years to agree one single document. 10 years is a bit of an exaggeration, but it depends on the size of the scheme and the complexity and all the elements. You probably know this by now. Planning permissions can be phased, so sometimes agreements are drafted depending on which phase you're in of the development, so it drags along, and which obligations are necessary will change with the life of the development. And if you're talking about litigation, it's usually quite quick, so the planning court hasn't been around. The planning tribunal is a sort of a new thing. It has less than, I think it was 2012. I'm not exactly sure. And since the planning tribunal was created, cases move quite fast. So I would say, it could be 3-4 months, maybe, a bit more, a bit less. When it comes to hearings at the planning inspectorates, they have changed the procedure rules not last year. Last year was a write-off for everyone. The year before last, and they're not supposed to be fast-tracked. So I haven't done any, because I'm currently on maternity leave, so I haven't done any appeals with the new rules, but I think it's probably less than 3 months, depending again on the complexity of the case. I think since we went into lockdown, things have been moving a little bit slower, but it's still progressing. It's mainly when you advise a client whether to go on appeal, to appeal a decision or not, or whether to challenge it legally, the costs more than the timing are quite a relevant element, because it can be quite expensive. You have solicitors, and you also have barristers, who are the legal professionals who act in the court, and you have planning consultants, you have environmental consultants. Everything adds up, and it can be quite expensive to challenge a decision. In certain cases, it would probably be cheaper to try to amend the scheme and go for a fresh planning permission. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Is there anyone got any questions?
Yeah. How did you know you wanted to be like a planning lawyer?
I didn't. I had no idea what planning law was. So there isn't such a thing as planning in Argentina. But when I moved to the UK, I came here to do a master's degree at King's College in London, and I needed to work because, I just needed money to pay my rent and so on. And I got a job at a law firm, and they took me to the planning side of things, and I enjoyed it. I always enjoyed architecture, and, I love urban life, and the fact that I could just somehow reconcile my love for buildings and my love for law was kind of attractive, because as we were speaking, like before we actually started, it's really nice to see projects you were involved in when you're walking around the city. I've only been in the Southwest for 2 years, but in London it was, I had something to do with that, and it makes you feel like a little bit more relevant and a bit more connected to the place you live. And I think the smaller the place you live, it's probably even more relevant how you connect. And I think we talked. I know Megan and Stinghan were definitely in the previous session when we talked about women in planning, but we had one session a couple of weeks ago about building cities for everyone. And as a professional in the planning world, it's quite interesting to see how you can actually make a change and push for different changes. And, having a legal background is always helpful. If you also have a bit of planning on that, you can definitely persuade people. Okay. Sorry, planning chose me. I didn't choose planning, so I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does.
But only because I didn't know what planning was, not because I don't enjoy planning.
And I just also wanted to ask, do you have transferable skills that you think are good for us to know? Like maybe one to do with like networking or like some form of like leadership, something like that?
Yeah, I have those skills. I'm very strong on networking, and I'm very strong on anything that's business development and management. But that's something you don't necessarily learn at law school. Those are skills that I acquired throughout my professional life. And I think those skills are, so important to have, especially if you're working in the private sector and you have to build a business. So those skills are definitely useful. And I always joke about this, but as a lawyer, you kind of you're trained to read the most boring documents in the world. And in a way, I think that's really a really good skill to have, because you can read terms and conditions, you can read agreements without falling asleep. I know it sounds really basic, but you're faced with these kind of documents and people lose patience straight away.
Yeah.
I have hands raising. I got Nicholas and Megan. I don't know which one went first. Hi, Nicholas.
Hi there. Great to see you. I'm Nick Smith. I lead the UE Bristol Planning School here. So thanks very much.
We met before.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, thanks very much for joining. I've just been sort of sitting in the background listening to the students' questions, which are fascinating, so I won't sort of take over. But I was just really interested. It's a thing which is often we've been asked before by students, in terms of those who are keen on sort of pursuing a career in sort of planning law, whether it's a case of there are some people who sort of studied law and then move into planning. There are others who sort of, like these guys here, who studied planning at an undergraduate, postgrad level, and then potentially sort of move into law. I don't know from your experience sort of what the balance is, whether people kind of typically start in law and then move into planning, or start in planning and move into law. And in terms of sort of that process, to me, is a little bit kind of mysterious in terms of sort of that training avenue.
Yeah, I've met barristers who were planners and trained as barristers, and I'm trying to remember if I met any solicitors that trained as planners. I think it would be very, very valuable to have your planning knowledge, and because as a planning lawyer, you only feed on the planning issues that have some sort of connection with the legal world, and when you need it, and if you train as a planner, you have a wider understanding of the whole planning system and where you should emphasize things. And I think it would be very valuable to be a planner and retrain as a lawyer. If you're a lawyer and you decide to retrain as a planner, yes, again, I think, you have a full understanding of exactly what the council may be asking for. You can be involved in the legal discussions because you have some sort of knowledge. I did work with a planning officer that had a law degree. And between us, it was a pain to work with him because he always thought he knew more than me. And it was like, just give me a break. I'm doing this every day. You just had your law degree in 1984. Just please. But no, in all reality, I think it can be very beneficial to both parties. And I wish there were more workshops and training that were shared for both of us, for the planning lawyers and the planners. I don't think there's that's one of the things I like about women in planning, is you just put everyone in the same pot and you kind of understand a bit more. There is a special RTPR certification for legal professionals. I guess that could be something, middle ground. I thought about doing so I'm now on maternity leave, I said that. And when I found out I was pregnant, I thought, oh, great, I have a year off. I'm going to do a master's in urban planning. And then I found out I was having twins, and that was just not realistic.
I think that's a fair point,
Yeah, my boyfriend is a planner, and he was like, you're just so detached from reality. You have no idea what it is. I know what it is to study, so give me a break. I love studying. I have 2 masters in law, and I retrained as a lawyer, and I could die studying. I just really enjoy that. But I would like to just find a bit more common ground, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Nick, I don't know when you joined, but when I had the slides, I did talk about the avenue to become that you can use to become a lawyer if you don't have a law degree. So.
Oh, okay, that's brilliant. Yeah, I was just with my postgraduates in another room. They were supposed to finish at 4:30, but they were inundating me with questions about the coursework. So sorry, I was a bit late. But
no problem. Yeah. So basically, you can, if you don't have any degrees, you can do a Silex course if you're already working in a law firm, or you can just convert your degree and then do the final training to become a full qualified solicitor.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Megan, did you have a question?
I did. It's very similar to what Nick just said, because when I was younger, I was obsessed with becoming an architect, and that didn't work for me because I found out I was dyspraxic. And then I've gone into a RICS degree, which is property development and planning, and I love the planning aspect, so I'm doing a planning master's next year. And the distance learning one they offer with, I think it's planning and urban leadership, it sounds amazing because it's great for industry professionals. But I always used to want to also do that law degree conversion, because I love the idea of conveyancing, I think that's the right word, for buying and selling land, and also land site acquisition. So I want to be a bit like with women in planning. I want to be in many pots at once and joining and sharing my knowledge. And I just hate the idea of siloism and everyone having to be separate, when clearly all our skills are useful together, and we can make the best use of the built environment if we understand other people's way of dealing with problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once we're just out in the wild again, it'd be nice if you, and this goes to women and men, if you want to join our Women in Planning drinks or any event, because that's when you start talking about, I'm lucky because my partner is a planner, so we sometimes talk about planning at home more than he wants to talk about planning. But when I have a question about, when I started doing planning, I barely understood what a local plan was and things like basic things. And he was a planning officer at some point. So it's just good to, pick up. And he does the same now when he's working. He doesn't pick up the phone because we're all in the same house now. But it's just, what would you say? What would you do? Is this doable? And it's just talking. It's just dialogue. You just need to keep talking. When I was working for local government, I informally started going out for drinks with the planners once every week, just something casual. But from that, I just got in touch with the enforcement team, and we just had some informal chats in the pub, which then continued to an actual meeting, and came up with a different strategy for the council to save some money in enforcement action. And those things only happen if you actually talk to each other. Communication is basic.
I had a second question as well, if that's okay. How have you found stakeholder engagement when you worked in the public sector and with community plans, and just how NIMBYism might play into it, or the green belt?
Well, when I work in local government, I was in London, so green belt is not a word that is used. No one cares about the green belt because there are other issues to deal with. There is a lot of NIMBYism, and it's very difficult, and it's very expensive to filter what is a genuine claim. Every local authority has this particular barrister that is not working anymore and has a lot of time and energy to sue the council for every single thing, and it's tweeting and raging, and it's so expensive for the local authority. And I see it now in Bristol sometimes as well. I live really close to East Street, and they're regenerating East Street, and just people are objecting for the sake of objecting, and it's really, really difficult as a local authority to find the balance on when to ignore and when to just pursue certain complaints. as a solicitor, the only thing you can do is just check merits and find if they actually have any legal merits and decide whether to go ahead or not. There's not much more you can really do. You have to, unfortunately, listen to everyone. That's a reality of democracy.
Megan, did you still have another question to ask, or? Oh, I guess it's just...
Hi, sorry. My boyfriend just called me because he just finished work. He's an engineer who studied robotics at uni. So, yeah, he always calls me at 5 o'clock, so it's just a bit of a weird thing. But yeah, I didn't have anything else to add. But I really find it interesting because I used to live in London suburbs, so I was Basildon, Newtown, and the councillors and the MPs always used to talk about Greenbelt being this perfect thing and talking about protecting it and like fighting, like literally field by field to stop garden villages or just different things that might destroy this beautiful greenbelt, even though greenbelt's just an urban containment policy. So it's really interesting how politicians play into it, and also how conservatism or maybe Lib Dems or Labour have different stances on what the NPPF is, and how we've had Conservatives in for about 10 years, and the NPPF I think was 2012, and all these new amendments in favour for sustainable development. It's really interesting to consider how are we going to help population changes and help provide housing when clearly planning sometimes has a bit of a issue in its own way, like that meeting that went a bit live a couple months back with the BBC News, and how teams works and how like we should all work together, but it's quite hard in lockdown.
It's hard without the lockdown. Planning committees are usually, battleground, battlefield, and I always worked for authorities that had very outgoing neighbours. The Greenfield is, 5 hours of discussion. We can talk endlessly about how far you should push with constructs such as the Greenbelt and how far you should push for housing and so on. It's a constant debate that keeps going on. But yeah, no, it's really difficult to handle everyone's voice at the same time. It's probably more, something the planners will have to deal with more than the solicitors. We just make sure that everyone's heard and that everything they say is sound. And if it's not, you just make a call on whether to entertain that or not.
Is there any more question to ask?
Fine, thank you, Justine. Yeah, that's really useful. Thank you, Coco.
Well, I'm not sure if you have you can circulate my details. I'm happy for anyone to email me if you are thinking of, converting or even just expanding a bit. Just please do get in touch. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn. I don't use Facebook, but I'm somewhere there. So do get in touch, and I'm happy to have a longer chat about what it actually entails. I'm a very passionate planning lawyer, I think, so you will get not a very objective comment from that.
Great.
It was really nice to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.